Hey gamers, welcome back to another Minecraft video. Today we're going to be taking things back to my roots and talk about college applications. Now, I myself am a couple of years removed from the whole college application process. I'm now a junior in college, but there are definitely still nights where I lie awake at night wondering why did Harvard reject me? And over the course of those many sleepless nights, I think I figured out at least a couple of the mistakes that I made, or at least the things that I thought were mistakes on my college applications. And so I figured that since we're at that time of year where high school students are all scrambling to get their applications in, I figured that I would share some of those mistakes that I made so that hopefully you guys watching this video don't also make those same mistakes so that you can potentially have more success in all your college application endeavors than I did. So with that being said, the first big mistake that I made on my applications was definitely not starting early enough on them. For my Common App essay, I didn't actually start writing it until the day before Halloween, so October 30th, which was also 2 days before early applications were due, whereas usually most people start working on their essays around the summer before senior year. For almost all of my applications, with very few exceptions, I started working on the actual application itself either the day before it was due or even like the day it was due. And so this meant that I really didn't have that much time to work on my applications, which was especially bad for my essays because, those take some time to write. They don't just pop into existence out of nowhere. And so being on such a crunch time like that was very stressful. And I remember spending the last few days of winter break just scrambling to get all my applications in. For essentially all of my applications, I submitted them at the very last minute to like 11:59 p.m. I have a very vivid core memory of me sitting at the dining table trying to submit my Yale application, and I have like 1 minute before the deadline, and I'm trying to get the credit card information in to submit my application, but my hands are shaking so much because I'm so stressed that I couldn't read the numbers. So that's essentially how it played out for all of my applications, submitting them at the very last minute. There were even some applications that I submitted after the deadline, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I did it anyways because, I just didn't have time to work on my applications and submit them because I was procrastinating so much. I think this definitely had an impact on my applications because if I had had more time to work on them, perhaps I wouldn't have been so stressed and maybe I could have written better essays. Who knows? But in any case, I submitted my applications very late, which I consider to be a mistake, but I did get into those schools that I submitted late to. So, I mean, things worked out for me, but I definitely don't recommend it for you guys to submit your application so close to the deadline because, things happen and it's much better for your sanity to just give yourself a little bit of time. It doesn't have to be so much, just at least a couple of days before the deadline so that you aren't scrambling so much. But yeah, I mean, things worked out for me, so I don't have too much else to say there. But for you, please don't do what I did. Please submit your applications before the deadline. Give yourself time. Don't stress yourself out too much, please. All right, moving on. The second big mistake that I made on my college applications was not doing enough research on the schools that I was applying to, which in hindsight didn't really make much sense because typically you're supposed to make your college list after doing pretty extensive research on the colleges that you're applying to because you want to make sure that you want to apply to them. But honestly, for me, I didn't really think too much when I was making my college list, and there wasn't too much rhyme or reason when I was putting schools together. I was kind of just like, yeah, I'll apply to that one and not that one, but I'll apply to that one. And so my list was just the names of schools. I really did not know too much about them, which was really bad, especially when it came for the essays that I was writing, because for some of the schools I was applying to, they would ask me why I wanted to attend that school, and I just have to be like, I read this thing on your website a couple minutes ago, and this is why I want to attend your school. And that wasn't really the best strategy when it came to writing my supplemental essays for those schools. And for a good number of those schools, I either got waitlisted or rejected. Some of them I did get accepted to, but it wasn't a good idea to not really have done too much research on my schools because regardless of like getting into the school or not, I didn't really know too much about like even what majors were offered, what kinds of classes I would be taking, what the school environment was like, what kinds of opportunities there would be for me. I kind of just went into my applications blind, and again, not a good idea. For you, please do some research on your schools so that you can be sure that you want to attend the schools that you're applying to, and also so that you can write better essays for when they ask you why you want to attend the school, and you don't have to just look up something on their website like 10 minutes before their application is due, because very, very stressful. Do not recommend doing what I did. And this also takes me into the third mistake that I made on my applications, which was applying to schools that I wasn't even all that interested in, which partially has to do with the fact that I didn't do too much research on my schools and only found out after the fact that perhaps I would not have wanted to go to them anyways. If you've ever seen my college decision reaction video, which I'll put in one of the corners, I'm not sure which one it goes in, but if you've seen that video, you would know that I applied to 27 schools. The real number is like a little bit higher, but there were 27 applications that I had to fill out, which is a lot of work that you have to do, especially when you're doing all your applications super last minute, which again, not a super good idea when you're working on so many applications with so little time, because it means you can't really devote as much time and effort into the individual applications as you may want. I did have a lot of safeties on my list because I was very stressed and had no confidence in my abilities whatsoever. But even still, some of those schools I perhaps would not have been very content or happy attending. And so I think that if I had been more thoughtful when it came to picking which colleges I wanted to apply to, which includes things like doing actual research on the school and some internal reflection on whether or not I could see myself at those schools, and if I'd been able to cut down pretty considerably on my list of safety schools, maybe bringing it down to like 2 or 3 at max, I could have either applied to more reach schools, which would have given me like a broader net of like top schools that I may have been interested in, or it could have also meant that I would apply to less schools in total, which probably would have been better for my sanity once again, because so many applications in so little time was a very bad idea and not a super great time for me in terms of general well-being. All right, fourth big mistake that I made on my college applications was writing bad essays. Now, I think it's pretty common sense that you would want to write good essays for your college applications, but I think for the majority of high school seniors, they wouldn't really have had too much experience writing college essays, because the things they'd be writing for their English or history classes is pretty different in style and structure and format. And so when it comes to the college essays, I think a big mistake that I made was not really knowing how to write them. So a lot of the essays that I wrote ended up being pretty bad, especially for like some of the earlier schools that I applied to. Like I remember my application to BU for Boston University. I sent in my application a couple months early because there was like some scholarship I was applying to. And so the essay that I wrote for them was very, very bad. Sometimes at night when I can't sleep, my brain will just remind me of this essay that I wrote and I will cringe because it was such a bad essay. Definitely one of the worst essays I've ever written in my life. That BU essay was very, very bad, and I ended up getting waitlisted at that school, where I think that my stats and everything else was pretty up to par and I probably would have been accepted otherwise, but because that essay was so bad, I ended up getting waitlisted, which honestly is better than I expected, because I thought I'd get flat out rejected because that essay was so bad. But I think that just goes to show that, essays are, I think, the most important part of your application, and something that, students may tend to overlook because they're like, yeah, it's just an essay, I know how to write things. It's really important to write good essays, and that means you have to do a lot of research on what makes a good essay, even for the specific prompts for your individual schools. I'd recommend going online and looking up example essays for the schools that you're applying to, so that you know what successful essays may look like, because different schools are looking for different things, and you just want to be prepared. And I just want to emphasize this note of preparation, because for a lot of my schools I ended up just copy and pasting some of my essays for other schools to those schools, which was not a good idea, because you want to write essays that are specific and unique to the schools that you're applying to, because even if the prompts are kind of similar, they are still going to be a little bit different, and you just want to make sure that your essay is like really specifically tailored to the schools you're applying to. For some of those schools where I did my copy pasting shenanigans, I either got waitlisted or rejected. And for my MIT application, I didn't realize that the prompts were going to be completely different in both word count and like the actual things they're asking you, which in hindsight I probably should have realized, because they are not on the Common App and they have their whole own application. And so starting my application the day that it was due, I opened it up and realized that none of the essays that I had prepared already could fit any any of those prompts. And so I just scrambled for like 20 minutes trying to write all of the essays. Obviously, I got rejected from MIT, and that was to be expected. But, for you, again, please take some time, give yourself time to work on your applications. Make sure that you know what you want to write for your essays, and make sure that your essays are not bad. I would recommend trying to see if there's a teacher that you could ask, or even better, a current student at the school that you're planning to apply to see if they can read your essay and give some feedback, because having more eyes on your essays can help you see things that you may not have originally and just give you a fresh point of view, which will help you, make a better essay overall and not make the same mistakes I made when writing a very bad, very, very bad essay to be you. And this brings us to my fifth mistake, which I wholeheartedly believe is the biggest mistake that I made in my college applications overall, and that was my decision to apply to Harvard Early Action. Applying to Harvard Restrictive Early Action was kind of a culmination of a lot of the different mistakes I mentioned earlier. I procrastinated on my application and started it pretty late into the timeline. And at this point, I also hadn't really done too much on my Common App essay, which meant that I was really struggling to finish everything in time. And, that meant that my essays probably were not as good as they could have been if I had just given myself more time to work on them. And this is compounded by the fact that this was the first application that I was sending out, which meant that I had no prior experience writing college applications, writing college essays, and I was just very inexperienced and unprepared going into it. And the reason why I decided to apply to Harvard REA was because I thought that it would give me a better chance of being accepted, because I saw that the acceptance rates for early action were higher than regular decision. But I didn't really take into account the fact that people who are applying early action are either athletes or like super geniuses who are already prepared for their applications, which I did not fall into either category. I was just some guy shooting a shot. And I think that overall it would have been a better idea for me to apply to Harvard regular decision. Not to say that it would have increased my chances of getting in or that I would have gotten in had I applied regular decision, but I think just having more time to work on my applications and more time to work on my essays would have been a lot better. Since I applied to Harvard REA, that meant I couldn't apply to other schools early action. And so when I got deferred from Harvard, that meant that I had a lot more applications to fill out. And so if I had been able to apply to a different school early action, like maybe UMass or some other school, I could have gone into those schools, and that would have helped me kind of cut down on my list of schools for the regular decision round. This also means that I would have had more experience writing applications and essays by the time I got to my Harvard application, which again, I can't say if that would have made a difference or anything, but I think at least for myself, I would have been more content with the outcome if I had had more experience working on applications, and at that point, I could have given my best effort, and at that point, whatever result came out would come out, and I would just have to accept it. But at the very least, I would know that I did give my best effort, which, given all the mistakes that I have made, I can't exactly say for my Harvard application. And so I would say that that was definitely the biggest mistake that I made in my college application process, the decision to apply to Harvard Early Action, and its effects kind of cascaded throughout the rest of my college application process. But at this point, it's all in the past now. I don't really care that I got rejected from Harvard anymore. At the time, I was definitely pretty sad about it, but now I get to go to Stanford, which I think is a better school. And, at the time, if things had been different, they would be different, but there's not really much point in wondering what could have been, because, I still get to go to a really great university, and I am very happy with how things came out. And even though I did make those mistakes, things worked out pretty well for me in the end, and I am very happy to be where I am right now. And if you'd ask me now if I had the chance to go back in time and change things in my college applications, would I? I honestly don't think that I would. I think that I'm very happy with how things are now, very happy with where I am in my college and academic journey. Overall, I'm just very content with how things are, despite the mistakes that I made. They're all just part of the process. But for you all watching at home, if there is a school, a dream school, if you will, that you are really, really gunning for, and your application is not in its absolute perfect, best possible form, you may want to wait until the regular decision round, because, early action round does technically have a higher acceptance rate, but there are some other extenuating circumstances there. But for the most part, you are equally as likely to get in whether you apply regular decision or early action, because it's the same people reading your application and the same criteria. So just whenever you feel like your application is most ready is when you should apply to the school that you want to go to. But for you, if you feel like by the time early action rolls around that your application is already the best it could possibly be, then go ahead and submit your application. But if you think you'd benefit from some more time to work on your essays and whatnot, I would highly recommend waiting until the regular decision round to submit your applications. And so these were the 5 biggest mistakes that I made on my college applications. But for me at this point, I think that I am very content with how things turned out. I mean, I am privileged enough to be able to attend Stanford University, and I'm now in my junior year, almost done. And so I'm very happy with how things turned out for me. But for you guys, hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and not make those same mistakes so that you can have more success on your college applications. And at the end of the day, some things are going to go your way and some things are not. So just be prepared for whatever outcome you get and just learn to take things in stride, because everything will work out in the end, I promise. And with that, we are at the end of the video. So as always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!